Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Best Practices for Protecting Your Next Generation Applications and Infrastructure. This webinar is brought to you in partnership with Veeam and produced by Actual Tech Media. Thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar. We've got a great event lined up for you today. Two really expert speakers in this topic, and they are here to help answer your technical questions around protecting your next-gen infrastructure and especially moving to the cloud, your cloud journey. So we want this to be an educational event, and as such, we encourage you to use the questions box there on the left-hand side of your audience console. I can call your attention to that here. Of course, we appreciate all the good morning, good afternoon messages from across the United States and around the world. But we also encourage your technical questions. We want to help you solve your IT challenges on this event. So appreciate those in advance. We will be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the event. Every time experts from Veeam are on, we always have just a flood of questions. There's a lot of Veeam fans out there and a lot of folks who are very interested in what Veeam is doing with all the new innovation. So thanks for the questions in advance. Also check out in the handouts tab, of course, there's a link there to the Veeam website if you'd like additional information about today's topic, the Veeam solution. I already see a comment coming in from Alan. He says, hello, Veeam user here. So always great to hear that. Thank you for the comment. We also will be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card prize on the live event. If you're watching this on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms can be found in the handouts tab. And I should mention that my name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator for today's webinar. And with that, I'm excited to introduce you to today's expert presenters on today's event. You'll hear from Mr. Dustin Albertson, Manager for Cloud and Application Alliances at Veeam, and Mr. David Hill, Global Technologist at Veeam. Dustin and David, it's really great to have you on the event today. I'll first hand it off to you. Take it away, David.
Yeah, hello everyone. Excited to talk to you today around the cloud and some best practices as well. And this is going to be an exciting topic that we can discuss today. So, quick look at the agenda. We're going to have a quick look at why people are actually doing backups in the cloud. We'll have a little look at the actual cloud journey as well. It's a bit of a cliche, but if you think back to how we used to do virtualization and how everyone started out in virtualization doing dev test, and then we got a bit braver and moved a few web servers into production and that kind of thing. We're going to talk about the similar kind of process that people are finding that out in the cloud as well. We really want to take some time and talk about cloud mobility. That's really important in this multi-cloud world that we're finding ourselves in now, where you're leveraging different public clouds, on-prem clouds, and all these different kind of service providers and the way that things are going. And then we're going to kind of finish off and talk about cloud native and hybrid cloud in general, and Dustin's going to kind of give you some examples. So with that, one of the aspects of the public cloud is how things are changing. When you think back 10 years ago, and I've kind of been working with the public cloud for about probably 9-10 years now, when AWS was just a tiny little business. They were doing, well, we say tiny, probably $50 million 10 years ago, maybe $100 million tops. Now they've turned into this $40 billion behemoth that pretty much everybody looks to for setting the bar for public cloud. But when we see what's happening, we're seeing that organizations are essentially changing how they're deploying their applications, whether it's obviously physical servers, that's shrinking significantly, as you would expect as time goes on. And then obviously virtual machines, well, virtualization's getting old now. We're on 15, 16 years worth of virtualization in production. And now we're looking at the cloud and what's happening. So when we're looking at what people are actually wanting to protect, 41% of people are looking to protect their public cloud workloads within the next 2 years, but 32% of respondents are actually doing that already today. So why are we actually looking to protect our workloads in the cloud. Isn't the cloud just a service that we buy and we don't need to worry about it? Well, the things that are the biggest causes of IT outages is always infrastructure and networking outages. So whether it's on-prem or out in the public cloud, simple things like changing some of your authentication services, or maybe you've just gone and edited a VPC setting, that can cause an outage out in the public cloud as well. And it tends to be the most impactful as well, which doesn't surprise you when you think about how much this affects your actual IT infrastructure. But when we look at the public cloud, what seems to be the issue? When I speak to a lot of customers who are just starting on their public cloud journey, and we say, right, okay, why do we need a backup? Well, if you look at this particular diagram, this is what's called a shared responsibility model, and this one's showing you AWS. You see at the bottom here, the stuff highlighted in green is all from AWS, and they support everything like the hardware, the infrastructure, the compute, storage, and networking, all that hypervisor layer. So when you go and buy and spin up an EC2 instance, you're leveraging and you're paying for all that infrastructure, and you're essentially just renting it from them. However, when you look at the top half of this slide, this is everything that you're responsible for. And the most important aspect of this is the customer data. That's important for you to make sure that that's protected. You own that customer data, regardless of whether you're running in AWS, on-prem, or in a different kind of service provider. The data is always your responsibility. If we take an example of Microsoft Azure as well, just to compare the two largest public clouds, it's exactly the same. When you look at this from an on-prem perspective, it's no surprise, everything is your responsibility. But then the more you move up the stack, whether it's infrastructure as a service, all the way through to software as a service, that data and information is always your responsibility, regardless of what you're actually buying, what you're paying for, and what you're leveraging. So when it comes to data loss, whether somebody deletes an instance or a virtual machine, comes and hacks your account, or maybe you're infected with ransomware, whatever the issue may be, data loss is always your responsibility. So that's why you always need to consider backups and data protection and business continuity out in the public cloud. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Dustin, who's going to give you some kind of getting started examples around what we should be doing out in the public cloud. So over to you, Dustin.
Hey, thanks, David. So yeah, just like David was mentioning, is why do we need backups in the public cloud, or why do we need backups in general? It would be the same as on-prem. So the cloud isn't this magical place that just all your dreams and worries disappear. It's making it easier to make mistakes. You can scale out easier. But there's also a lot more people that are typically involved in those cloud decisions. So the kind of journey that we're going to follow in this slide deck is kind of one of okay, maybe I'm new to cloud, maybe I don't do anything in cloud. Let's look at a few ways of how can we test it out. What are methods that we can do with Veeam, or on a lot of these clouds to get backup data up there and see what it's like. And one that never seems to go away is tape. David, I'm sure you run into a lot of customers that still use tape. I speak with a lot of the tape gateway or service gateway people at AWS, the product managers, and they are constantly saying how many Veeam users that they have and things like that. But it's a simple solution, right? So replace the physical tapes that you're doing and sending to Iron Mountain, sending to a closet somewhere, and putting in a bank deposit box, sending to a cave, all those things that you're typically doing with tape. It's an easy kind of lift and shift to change that to a strategy of using a VTL gateway, where you're actually using virtual tapes and you're storing those in the cloud. So in this instance, this is an AWS storage gateway, and you're storing that in in S3. So when the tape is still connected to the library, it's stored in S3, and then as soon as that tape is ejected and exported, it's then moved into either Glacier or Glacier Deep Archive. And you know, part of that is that the Glacier and Glacier Deep Archive and S3 for that matter, a lot of the part of that is the hidden cost. You know, people always see that price per gig and are like, okay, that's super cheap, I want that. Well, there's also a lot of penalties, right? There's penalties for early deletion. There's penalties for bringing that data back. So it's those types of things that you have to be aware of when you're creating your cloud strategy. So in this instance, tape is going to be best used as archival purposes, just like you would on-prem, right? It's not going to be something easy you're going to restore from immediately. So putting those long-term archivals, keeping them in Glacier, Deep Archive, and almost forgetting that they're there, right? It's most of the time used for compliance reasons. David, would you, is there anything you would want to add to that, or is that kind of what you're seeing as well?
Just kind of touching on what you said about the tapes. It's we have kind of Dave Russell, who works in my team. He's actually on Twitter as Backup Dave. He still loves tapes, and interestingly, as you say, a lot of customers we still speak to leverage tape every day, and it's a massive thing. So being able to consider the public cloud just for data storage around backups is certainly not only an entry point, but from a cost perspective can significantly reduce those costs as well. So it's definitely worth looking at from that perspective.
Yes, good point. We've made announcements as far as currently, I would say this is our integration in with Glacier and Deep Archive. And we've made announcements at Veeam that we're going to incorporate Glacier and Deep Archive support into our cloud tier. So that into our I should say, capacity and archive tier. And that's a good kind of talking point here, is to get into that, right? So in my mind, the next step would be, we've got archival, we've got tape out there, but what about more current backups? What about, maybe I want to keep an instant copy, or maybe I want to tier some of my backups from on-prem into S3. And this is where, this feature of Veeam would come into play. We have a feature called Scale Out Backup Repository, and it has an area of it called capacity tier. And what that means is that you can add an object storage repo. So that could be an AWS S3, Azure Blob, IBM Cloud, and then S3 compatible as well. So we have a lot of other vendors that have benefits as well, like a Wasabi or a Backblaze and things along those lines. And not to mention all your on-prem object vendors as well. So this allows you to add that repo into a scale-out repo, and then you have a couple of options. You have a copy mode, and then you have a move mode. Copy means that you're going to copy it as soon as the backup's taken. So as soon as that backup job is done and successful, it's going to immediately copy that data off to S3 or off to object. This is really good for meeting, the 3-2-1 rule. Where you have 3 copies of your data, 2 of them different media types, and then 1 being offsite. So this kind of helps you meet that. But another key feature of that, of course, is security aspect of it. So one of the things that we could do with copy mode is leverage S3 object lock, and that provides immutability. So you can set a certain period of time. You say, hey, as soon as these backups are up here, keep them object locked for 30 days, 90 days, whatever you want to choose. And that prevents it from being infected by crypto locker or ransomware or anything like that, because nobody can edit it. So you can still restore from those files, but you can't edit or delete those files for that period of time that you put on there. And going back to costing, costing is always a big part of this. So some of the magic that we do when we write to object is we don't copy multiple blocks. So if data already resides up there, we're just going to use a pointer to that data. And then, whenever we need to restore that data, one thing we do is we look for that data locally on-prem first and restore what data we can on-prem and only pull back the needed data out of object. This helps with API calls. This helps with egress charges. This helps with all of that. So it's a really cool feature. And we have, I've done webinars with people on David's team as well as David, where we've kind of done a deep dive into capacity tier alone, because you can spend a full day, kind of diving into the features of that, right? And I mentioned that, the immutable aspect of it, being able to do immutability, which is our term for it, but again, it's S3 object lock. And then, the 3-2-1, right? That's what I mentioned before. Within a single backup job, you can control all this. So you can scale out your GFS and all of that. So it's a really cool feature, and a lot of people like it in Veeam because that's how we do everything. Everything's done at the job level. So you can control your GFS, you can control your backup, where it's landing, where it's going, all of that kind of within the job. David, is there anything that you want to add, about scale out backup repository? Because I mean, you could go on all day about this, right?
Oh, I know, yeah. The 3-2-1 rule is quite a critical piece, I think. That 3 copies of your data across 2 different media types with at least 1 off-site. A lot of people say, well, that's a bit of overkill, but if you actually think about it, having 3 copies of your data on 2 different media types is at least 2 different media types. It's pretty critical when you think, you've got your production data, you've got your backup data, and then you've got a copy off-site as well. So if any one of those becomes corrupted, you've always got a fallback position to that. So always consider that best practice of that 3-2-1 rule and look at how you can build that in, whether it's just your photos on your iPhone, maybe going up to iCloud and Dropbox, or your critical production data that's stored on a primary storage device in your data center, then offloading that out to the public cloud, things like that.
Yeah, and this in my mind would be, you could leverage this with the the tape gateway that we just spoke. Tape is going to be, again, for more archival purposes. This is more of your medium, your near term and medium range, because you can restore out of here. You can migrate your data. You can set the move mode to tier that data from your on-prem repo into S3, and still have the ability to restore out of it with almost instantaneous restore capabilities. So I mean, it's really a unique feature, and you can use it with Glacier and tape and all that as well. So which leads me to to the next part of the journey. Like, you can get the data up there into S3, but then what do we do with it, right? That data's there. Can we do anything with that data? So David, why don't I hand this off to you and let you kind of walk through the cloud mobility aspect and how we treat data.
Yeah, thanks, Dustin. So cloud mobility, I find it quite exciting for a start, just from a technologist perspective. But essentially, when you think about cloud mobility, and I touched on it at the beginning around this multi-cloud world that we're living in, whether it's you've got some workloads running on vSphere and Hyper-V, you've got some workloads running out in AWS and Azure. How do you not only protect those, but how do you manage those? There's certain times where we've seen a lot of customers, they'll move a workload to AWS, and then for whatever reason, they're having authentication issues because there's no local authentication put in place in AWS. So then they want to bring this workload back quickly and easily. And how do you actually do that? Well, from a cloud mobility perspective, what Veeam does is pretty much any backup that you take of any instance, whether it be that vSphere VM, that physical Linux server, that AWS or Azure instance and VM, you can take that and restore it to any other platform. We have our portable data format, which is one of the core pillars of everything that Veeam does, allowing you to just migrate those workloads back and forth. So if you think about an example of taking a backup of your vSphere VMs, obviously we see in this diagram here, we have our main office, we've got some VMs running there, we take some backups. Maybe our office goes offline, so we can remove that, say it's blown up, it's caught fire, whatever. Taking that Veeam backup repository, we can actually right-click just on that backup and say, I want to do a direct restore to Microsoft Azure or AWS. We restore that, and then we have a temporary office where we can actually go and access those workloads out in the public cloud. So this is a great example of like instances where there's fires or there's like, you know, power outages, that kind of thing, how you can move these workloads around and just very quickly and very easily recover from them. And then we even look at like the COVID example, you know, more and more people this year have been leveraging the public cloud because you can't get in the data center anymore. You know, you're not allowed, at some point, you weren't allowed to leave your home. You weren't, in certainly some states, you literally had to stay at home. So how do you get to the data center in the event of a server failure? Well, with Veeam, we were able to help a lot of customers just migrate to the public cloud and move those workloads out to the public cloud. So made it very easy in this kind of crazy world that we've been living in this year. And with that, it's good if we can focus as well on not only migrating existing applications and workloads that are running on traditional infrastructure like physical and virtual, but also born in the cloud application. So a lot of people are using the cloud for development and pushing out applications to production environments. So Dustin, do you want to talk a little bit about how we can leverage the public cloud for our essentially next-gen applications that we're developing that integrate with different services out in the public cloud?
Yeah, appreciate it. So, I mean, as you mentioned, you know, once the data's up there, right, you know, being able to just facilitate, you know, doing something with that data. And you hit on it there that our Veeam format is really kind of pivotal to that. You know, being able to migrate that anywhere, open it up with any Veeam instance is really key. So we're really proud of that because it's your data, right? We don't want to keep it hostage. So one unique use case is, you know, I've seen where customers have put their data in S3, for example, and they have a disaster, and instead of having to, you know, bring their on-prem environment back up and then start doing restores, they were able to deploy the community edition of Veeam inside of AWS as an EC2 instance, connect it up to that object repo, and start doing instant restores or start doing direct restores into EC2 instances. You know, they were able to do that in a matter of minutes because you go download the free edition. We're not going to hold you hostage. You know, you don't have to have a license in there. You don't have to have a support contract or any of that. It's your data, right? We're not gonna hold that hostage. So the next step of the journey is of course either hybrid or cloud native, and we can kind of hit on both, right? Because some are going to do both and some are not. I've got a bunch of kind of slides here, and we'll walk through them, some of them, but really it's kind of going to be a conversation between David and I. It's you know, cloud native, it is unique depending on who you are or what you're using it for. So in the Veeam aspect, we have this product called Veeam Backup for AWS. We have Veeam Backup for Azure. What that means is it's a product that's deployed through the marketplace of those clouds, and you can deploy it through the marketplace. It deploys as an instance or as a VM inside of Azure, and you're able to install it and start protecting your instances within AWS or Azure. This is important because, you know, if we look back at the beginning of the presentation where we had the shared responsibility model, AWS also has this thing called the well-architected framework. And in both of those, it's all about, you know, making sure your data is protected, right? So, you have to protect that data. You just can't assume that it's on there. EBS has, 29s of durability or whatever it is, and it's going to be all right. No, you still need to protect that. And that's what this is. So it's a policy-based automation. So you install it, you create your policies, and you say, hey, I want to protect these EC2 instances. I want to do snapshots, every hour, every day, and keep those for X period of time. But you also have the ability to convert those snapshots into backups. So part of the magic that we're doing is we'll take that snapshot, we'll mount it to a worker instance, and we'll convert that into a Veeam format and store it on S3. What that enables you to do is you can keep it there for longer term. You're able to, take advantage of the prices of S3 and store it for maybe archival purposes. But it also gives us a way to connect that to a Veeam server on-prem. So maybe you have VBR and you have VBA, what we call VBA, so Veeam Backup for AWS, running in the cloud, and you want to treat them independently. So you can do that. You can manage them both with VBR. You can manage them both independently, but the important part there is that you're able to see those backups that VBA is taking, and you can do restores. You can do restores back on-prem. You can do restores back into side of AWS, therefore making sure that that data is protected. David, before I go into some of these slides, is there anything that you wanted to add there, or am I doing that good of a job? I can just continue.
Well, you are awesome, Dustin, but I would like to touch on what you said at the beginning about cloud native means different things for different people, and that's really important when you're looking at the different public clouds as well. People choose different public clouds for different capabilities and services. If you're a .NET developer, you're probably not going to choose AWS to go develop your code. So you're more than likely going to select Azure. So depending on what the requirements are for those public clouds, being able to protect those different workloads is critical to the business. So depending on what you're doing and depending on where you're going, choosing the public cloud, whether it's like in AWS, you need some you're leveraging like RDS databases, so database as a service. Are you able to protect and back up those? Are you able to go over to Azure and back up all your workloads in a resource group? So that cloud native, as Dustin said, really does depend on what you're doing and what's happening really in the public cloud.
Yeah, good point.
And you did talk through some of these as well.
Yeah, I mean, some of the, like this one, for example, this is walking through an instance where VBR, Veeam Backup and Replication, is connected to VBA, and it's taking snapshots and backups of EBS instances and EC2 instances, and then connecting it to what we call in VBR a external repo. And we're able to do backup copy jobs of that data that's sitting there in S3 back to VBR. This is pretty neat, right? So you again, it's that data portability, cloud mobility kind of aspect we're talking about. Where you have people restoring to other data centers, other on-prem, they're using it as a migration tool maybe. Again, it's all about that flexibility. Now, some of you may never use these features, but it's nice to have them when you do, or if you want to. And then, again, it's a lot of these are just going through situations where we can show you every single situation, that is going to. But again, it's like the instant VM recovery is a pretty cool one. FLR. This one's a really cool one, right? So restoring to AWS or Azure from the other cloud. David, I know this is really cool. Yeah. It's kind of one that we always hit on as well. So it's about
this is my
maybe
favorite.
I want to do a migration, maybe I want to restore, right?
Yeah, and it's always like, if you think just being able to recover to different public clouds as well. So we saw, I don't know if anybody saw the other day who uses Microsoft services. There was an authentication issue, and even my Hotmail account I couldn't log into. So if you've got mission critical workloads and you're unable to log in, doing a quick restore to another public cloud like AWS, for example, makes life so much easier. So that whole kind of the power of Veeam and just being able to restore your workloads wherever you want and back up your workloads is pretty critical from that perspective. So yeah, it really does help in this crazy COVID-19 2020 crazy world where we just have to try and figure out what's going on every day from the comfort of our own homes. So yeah, I'd seriously recommend just having a look at cloud mobility and what you need to get started with the public cloud.
So we're going to pause here. David, we'll leave it there for some questions. So if you want to, I see some questions have popped up. Let's take a minute or two and answer some of those questions.
Yeah. So Chris Mullican says, what about geo-replication? Do you use the provider's replication or set up Veeam in multiple locations?
That's a good question. So if you're referring to like geo-replication of the S3 bucket or object bucket, I should say, then yes, we would leverage AWS replication or Azure-based replication so that you can replicate that data from bucket to bucket. From a Veeam standpoint, if let's say bucket in US East goes down, again, our backup file is portable. So when you connect it up to, let's say you're replicating it to US West, when you connect Veeam up to that, we're automatically going to see that data is in that bucket, and we're going to say, hey, do you want to import this data? And you just click yeah, and then you just be able to go ahead and start restoring that data.
Yeah, great answer.
Really good presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, David.
Go ahead, David. Did you want to say something else?
No, I was just going to tell Dustin how great he was again.
Awesome. Well, really cool presentation. This is a hot topic, David and Dustin. We do have some more questions coming in. I just wanted to step in here and just encourage anyone, if you have a question about today's topic and how Veeam accomplishes this, now's the time to get it in. So, and with that, there are some questions rolling in. So while you guys review those questions, I had a question for you here as well, and that is, how does Veeam store data on S3 or Blob to keep the cost down? Is there some way to help minimize the cost?
Yeah. So when we do that, I kind of highlighted it on it a little bit, but we actually, if you are familiar with how RAFS works, and essentially it's using block pointers or references to unique data. We're kind of doing the same thing, right? So when we move objects to block, or when we move objects to object, we don't move it twice. So if that data is already up there, we're just going to use a pointer, and that helps save a lot of space and a lot of API calls. And again, the API calls and the egress charges and things like that are all the hidden costs that most people don't ever think about. So that's one way we help save it. The second way is we always look for the data closest to home, meaning we look in the performance tier of a scale-out repo for that data, because there's a high probability that some of that data already resides locally, and we're going to pull those blocks first, and then we're only going to pull back the needed objects from S3 or Blob or whatever to be able to restore that file. So you can restore just a file out of object. You could do an instant VM restore out of object. You can restore, the full VM, all of that. So the unique thing is that we don't have to dehydrate or rehydrate a full backup file. We're able to pull back just the unique blocks or objects that we need, and therefore saving a lot of egress charges and API calls. Excellent.
That sounds very efficient. Could save a lot of companies a lot of money there on storage. Kenneth has commented that Veeam is great. We started using Veeam Cloud Connect and Veeam Replication. Love Veeam. Lots of good fans out here supporting Veeam. There's another one from Guillermo, said a really good, interesting presentation. Lots of good feedback. So next question I wanted to ask you here is about what are some common mistakes that you see people making in the cloud?
I can answer with
okay, yeah,
the
go
most.
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So I actually had this question come up at a VMworld session I was doing probably 2 years ago, and someone actually they were using a VMware public cloud at the time, which doesn't exist anymore, and they couldn't understand why all their workloads were constantly being hacked, and they were having essentially just being bombarded with denial of service attacks, and there was all sorts going on. And we actually looked, and they'd set their firewall rules to any, so everything was just open. There was no protection. So it was kind of, when I spoke to the customer, I was like, "What you doing? You know, this is like any," and they were like, "But it's in the cloud. It's secure." And I was like, so I had to kind of explain to them that the considerations of the public cloud are pretty much exactly the same as your physical data center. Just because it's essentially another data center, then you need to understand that you still need to secure it and protect it. And it's the same with moving workloads to the public cloud. If you've got a VM running on vSphere and it's got like 200 gig of RAM in it and 16 virtual CPUs, don't move it to AWS and give it a T2 Micro that has like 500 meg of RAM and one vCPU. You know, it's not going to work. So understand the differences between the different platforms, but then look at the similarities as well, I would say. Anything else, Dustin?
Yeah, just to add on to kind of what you're saying is some of the biggest mistakes I see are just making assumptions, right? And just assuming that either something's being done or something costs this much. Yeah, you really need to kind of do your due diligence and make sure that you're planning out your strategy properly. I would say just every major vendor out there, AWS, Veeam, whoever, we have a bunch of field SAs, SEs, who are there to help, answer some of your questions. Go to our forum, reach out to AWS and say, listen, I'm thinking about doing this or backing up to there. Can you help me design a plan? And we're more than happy to help you do that, because it's in our best interest, right? We want to make sure that you are setting it up properly, that your RPOs, RTOs are met, and that everybody's safe. So, leverage those tools that are available for you. And I know my AWS counterparts would say the same thing. They're there to help make sure that you are using it and set up properly. So, leverage those capabilities.
Yeah.
Great advice. Don't assume anything. I like that. Next question here they're asking is, does Veeam have integrations to other clouds besides AWS and Azure?
I would just say,
not at this.
I was just going to say, there are other public clouds available to use, and watch this space.
Yeah. I'll leave it at that. But we do have, I'll say real briefly, we do have other integrations. So in the VMware-based clouds. So we are fully capable in VMware Cloud and AWS, Google Cloud VMware Solutions, IBM Cloud VMware Solutions, Oracle Cloud VMware Solutions. So if it's a VMware-based cloud, we're most likely working there. And we have KB articles. So if you go to veeam.com and look for KBs, you can search the respective kind of VMware-based cloud and find out if there are any limitations or caveats. But yeah, to add on to that, most of the VMware-based clouds we support, and stand by, keep watching. It's going to be an interesting Q4.
Yeah.
Excellent. I like the teaser there. All right. Next question. What about ransomware? I mean, this is always a hot topic. They're asking here, can Veeam help to protect me from ransomware?
Go on, I'll let you answer that one, Dustin. I know it's your favorite topic.
Yeah. So yeah, I mentioned the immutability aspect. That's a big one. So being able to leverage S3 object lock to protect those instances by locking that backup file down so that it's not editable. we're expanding on that, right? So there's we have a program called Veeam Ready, which works with our alliance partners to validate these kind of solutions or test these solutions. So we have a bunch of on-prem devices that support S3 Object Lock, like MinIO and Cloudian and Scality and stuff like that. But we also have other cloud-based object storage vendors that are going to be implementing it. So just check out Veeam Ready, check that. But we've also announced that in V11 of our product, we're going to bring that kind of immutability aspect to on-prem repos. So Linux-based repos and things like that are going to be able to have this immutability aspect. So that's going to be big, and that kind of stuff is going to help with that. But again, it goes back to planning. So one thing that I've kind of always harp on is don't have your Veeam server connected to the domain if you can help it. Have it offline. Have it be its own environment, so that it's not impacted by these kind of things. And it doesn't always help. It doesn't always prevent it, but it's all a bunch of those little steps kind of add up to the big one, right?
All right, excellent. Lots of things there that Veeam can help with when it comes to ransomware. Another question they're asking here about data labs. What is the Veeam data lab, and how can it help?
Yeah, you got that, David, or you want me to take it?
No, go on, you can do data labs.
Okay, cool. So data labs are it's a method for it's really cool. So it's a method for testing backups or being able to work with that data in a quarantined environment. So what that enables is we have this little virtual appliance that gets deployed, and it creates an environment within vSphere or that is able to be off on its own. So we have some features called Sure Backup and Sure Replica. And this provides another method for testing your backups and making sure that they're viable. So when a backup job is done, you can have the Sure Backup job start. And what it does is it deploys that backup or restores that backup into that quarantined environment and is able to test it. So you're able to test it to make sure that it comes online. You're able to test it to make sure that applications are there. Again, it's about leveraging that data. So one unique way to do it is deploy a backup into this environment, data labs environment, and maybe you test an upgrade, test a patch, test some code that you're going to launch on your production server without impact in production. So it's a really unique way of being able to work with the data that you're already storing and you already have without impacting your production environment.
Excellent. All right. I like that. Data Lab sounds really cool. It sounds like something I'd really like to use and could just have so many different ways that you could leverage that. Next question: what about backing up or protecting SaaS applications like Office 365? Can Veeam do that as well?
Yeah, I'll answer that one. Veeam offers a product called Veeam Backup for Office 365, and that integrates with everything natively. So even like obviously backing up all your Outlook, your SharePoint Online, we can do Teams backup, so it can back up all your Teams chats as well, which again, when you think about COVID, you've never seen messaging apps used so much as we have this year. So yeah, Veeam has a product that integrates with that, and actually it's probably our fastest growing product in our product lineup at the moment, just purely around what's happening with COVID. So yeah, go and have a look at veeam.com and you'll see a lot of demos around Veeam Backup for Office 365 and things like that.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, it looks like that's all the time we have, and we've covered all the questions I see that have come in. Dustin and David, it's been really great having you on. Really cool stuff. A great presentation. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
And thank you everyone out there in our audience for joining us. There's more information, as Dustin and David said, over at veeam.com. More resources, videos, white papers, solutions briefs, ebooks. There's a whole community out there, and of course, free trials of the Veeam solution. You can try it out for yourself and see how Veeam can help you to solve your IT challenges around data protection and disaster recovery, and of course, recovering or preventing ransomware. And finally, before we go, I wanted to announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. That's going to Dave Golden from Maryland. Congratulations, Dave Golden from Maryland. Again, thank you to everyone out there in the audience for joining us on today's webinar. Thank you to our expert presenters, and thank you to Veeam for supporting today's event. I hope that you learned a lot, and have a great day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.